I wish I was a political satirist, because if there is one community that is feasting this year, it is surely political satire. All the stuff happening in the run-up to the US election, so much to satirise. I mean, what is the deal with that Donald Rumsfeld, eh? This is Spectator Spider-Man 202, part fucking 9 of 14. 14 parts. Ridiculous. Even more so when you consider the amount of plot involved with this Maximus Carnage crossover. This is a good issue of it though. We have DeMatteis and Buscema, brother of Buscema. So we have a steady and reliable creative team. Maximus Carnage is a giant team-up story, basically. Spider-Man, Spider-Man's friends and allies, and Venom. They team up to battle Carnage and his motley crew of oddball Spider-Man villains like Demon Gobbler, Double Gagger and Curry Man. I like all 5 of these villains, but here is something I have never done before and I am unlikely to ever do again. This is the trade paperback I have of this story. This is about 15, 20 years old. Printed 2004. So there's the answer to that. This is back in the days of them condensing stuff and trying to make it read like a story rather than 14 issues. Here is the issue we're looking at, and I'll turn the page here and you'll notice 2 things. First, we are missing the first page showing the cast, and secondly, the double splash page has been flipped, and now you've got to turn it on its side to read it, which I love doing. But also the titles have been removed and the image itself has been widened a bit. Here in the issue we cut off a little bit of Pepsi from Coke and Pepsi, but in the trade we have almost all of them. And at the opposite side we have a fat load of empty space to the right. I'm pointing this out because I actually do miss decent quality after editing. This is basically what you need for a lot of the covers for those awful epic collections. Images usually need some degree of alteration when they are being presented in a different way. In this case, if you hadn't realised, it would have been that the page height is actually a bit larger than the width of 2 pages, so they had to fill it a bit more to make it balance with the regular pages. This one is, like every part of Maximus Carnage, a big stupid fight. Maximus Carnage can be enjoyable, especially if you pick out an issue of it to read, rather than sit down and read all 14 in order. But the thing that is bad about Maximus Carnage is it really goes nowhere. First time I tried reading it, I gave up after about 6 or 7 parts. Basically, all that happens is Spider-Man's side fight Carnage's side, and they lose. And then Spider-Man's side will get another character added to their roster. Deathclock, Iron Fist, Shite Watch. It goes on and on. What we have now, though, is a pretty decent cast, because they are all Spider-Man characters. They were all introduced in Spider-Man. Even Firestart, she was introduced in a Spider-Man cartoon. And this issue really does focus on Firestart. And you've got to turn this page sideways, which I love doing, You've got to turn it sideways to read it, and I love doing that. It is the heroes versus the villains. And then over here is Mary James, and she is having a fag, worried about Spider-Man. The rinse and repeat formula for Mary James cutaways in the early 90s. The only addition is the fag. I'm English, I'm referring to a cigarette. And I've said tab because that is what we call them up here, but you'd think she was drinking some sort of soda pop, wouldn't you, over in America? Mary James, she started smoking to cope with the stress of her husband being Spider-Man. And as a subplot, I quite like that, and I think it could be good, but like his parents returning, like the Clone Saga, and probably even like Maximus Carnage, there was never any intended ending to it. There's scenes, and there is developments with it, but an ending? Gosh no. I want to talk a bit about Mary James smoking, actually. People hate this subplot and hate Mary James for it. They think that it is gross and unflattering, and she is being selfish and stubborn. I am going to do the most disingenuous thing and group all those people in with Dan Slott. Dan Slott once pointed towards it as a reason why the marriage is awful and should never have happened. Because in Dan Slott's mind, a wife must conform to whatever standards a pig man has for his woman. Mary James smoking was a coping method. It showed a vulnerability and the stress of having to deal with her husband putting his life on the line every fucking day. And it was believable. I don't smoke. I have never smoked. Never even tried it. Smoking turns me off women, actually. Except January Jones. And she manages to make smoking look sexy somehow. And she is the only woman in history who has done that. But with Mary James, I liked that it added a little bit of a human flaw to the otherwise perfect supermodel wife, similar to January. If it was written better, maybe I would be able to say that January Jones and Mary James are the only two women who didn't turn me off when they were smoking. Sadly, the writing attached to it, when it was directly addressing things, wasn't favourable to Mary James. And even Peter Parker, he usually comes off as a lecture machine. The thing is, ironically, the people who complain about the marriage say that Peter Parker being married to a perfect wish fulfillment supermodel trophy wife makes him unrelatable. But then they still complain about Mary James smoking. Something that makes her very human and believable. It's something that really brings her down to earth and makes her feel real. The other thing I want to say is that smoking turns me off, but if a woman smokes, that's their choice. If a woman likes cigarettes, they shouldn't be forced to stop because a man thinks they are gross, or because Dan Slott thinks women aren't allowed any choices of their own. Maybe If a woman is great, her smoking doesn't matter in the long run. Maybe you will come to look past it, or maybe even come to find it is something that does not affect your feelings for her at all. I am specifically thinking of January Jones again. Amazing woman. I reckon a lot of that is getting cut. Too condescending. Getting back to this though, one of our villains is Sharif. She is Carnage's girlfriend, and she is new. She was introduced for this story, and I have read Maximus Carnage a few times now. I don't know why, but I have never retained the information this issue brought to my attention. You see, Sharif, her origin is apparently that she was a junkie, and one day, while off her head on the drugs, Pepsi from Coke and Pepsi sucked her off inside of his cloak, and it drove her crazy. And that awakened her muty powers. I like Sharif, actually. I said I like all 5 of the villains in this. And even though I like Sharif, I have never once remembered that information. I don't think it is brought up ever again. I think it is mentioned in another part of Maximus Carnage, but that is it. Come next week, I will not remember it. Sharif has 2 powers. One is emotional resonance. She amplifies negative emotions in people, and this is shown here when she drives random people into becoming a violent mob and joining the fight. As I said though, each part of Maximus Carnage is the heroes are defeated and then they come back the next issue to fight again. It's not great. I will note, Curryman doesn't do anything in this issue. He doesn't fight anyone. He is forgotten about. Jim DeMatteis does write a whole story with Curryman and Sharif not long after this in Amazing Spider-Man. I'm just saying that if you feel robbed of a Jim DeMatteis Curryman story. The standout scene, the best part of the issue, and even the whole story, I reckon, is our fight with Carnage in this issue. The heroes have on their side Firestar, someone who has powers that are one of Carnage's weaknesses, fire. The question now becomes how they are going to use that advantage. Spider-Man and Firestar and the heroes, they don't want to kill anyone, but Venom is pointing out and insisting that it is the only way to handle Carnage. Carnage and his symbiote will just keep recovering from anything that isn't fatal. We are challenging the morals of the characters. We are also 9 parts in, so Spider-Man has been tested time and time again. Here is a splash page from the last Spectator Spider-Man part. An iconic splash page that, I imagine, you possibly had to turn on its side to read, which I love doing. So now, Spider-Man regrettably has resigned himself to agreeing with Venom that we are too far into the crossover and Carnage needs dealing with. And it's only Spider-Man's admittance that convinces Firestar she actually needs to do this. Here is the page. Great stuff. Much of the sequential storytelling that this Buscema was developing on this title. As Firestart is pouring on the fire, slowly killing Carnage, we see Spider-Man come to regret and change his stance, and Firestart's resolve diminishing alongside Spider-Man's separate realisation, and then Venom slobbering over everything. Fantastic page. So Carnage, he is given a reprieve. It is part 9 of 14. There's still 5 parts to go. We cannot burn him to death in part 9. We're not Ryan Johnson. And we have some more amazing storytelling with Sharif fighting Venom. Sharif's other power is one of Venom's weaknesses, sonic blasts, and we are seeing that here. Overall, this is a strong issue. The best of Maximus Carnage. We have great art, and we have Venom getting beaten up by a woman, and then we end with Captain America, and you have to turn it on its side to read it, which I love doing. Again, they flipped it for the trade, removed the next issue blurb, and extended the top and bottom of the image. As much as I love having to turn it on its side to read it, I think a splash image like this was what it needed. Captain America is a classy guy. He doesn't need any of that 90-degree rotation bollocks. In a team-up story where more and more characters are added to the mix, a simple splash page at this point does the job. It's not that mammoth a reveal that we are having another hero added to the story, even if it is Captain America. And they think Iron Fist trumps this. They think after bringing in Captain America, Iron Fist is an appropriate one to come next. Let's be honest, Maximus Carnage is stupid and dumb, and you have got to turn a lot of the pages sideways to read them. But this issue by itself is where most the actual quality can be found. I recommend it. I recommend part 9 of 14. One thing about Maximus Carnage, perhaps a strength, is that there is so little plot across 14 issues that you can just read part 9 of 14 and not be lost. I'll give this part 7 of 7 thumbs up.